The elephant grass stood 7 feet tall along the river valley in eastern Myanmar, swaying in the morning wind like an ocean of green and gold. The blades were thick enough to conceal a person completely, and the terrain rolled in gentle waves that could hide entire squads if they knew how to use the ground properly. Staff Sergeant Stella Rivera had been lying motionless in that grass for 6 hours, her ghillie suit blending perfectly with the vegetation, her breathing so controlled that not a single stalk moved unnaturally. 30 years old, lean and compact at 5'7", with black hair tucked under camouflage netting and dark eyes that could pick out movement at distances most people couldn't clearly see. The M110 semi-automatic sniper system lay beside her, a weapon most conventional snipers never got to touch, let alone master. But Stella Rivera wasn't a conventional sniper. 200 meters ahead, a SEAL fire team was moving through a dried creek bed, conducting what was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance patrol through militant-controlled territory in the dense jungle border region. Lieutenant Commander Alex Brennan led the 4-man element with the kind of casual confidence that came from dozens of successful operations. His team, Chief Petty Officer Isaiah Grant, Petty Officer First Class Marcus Liu, and Petty Officer Second Class Carlos Mendez, moved with practiced efficiency, spacing proper, weapons ready, eyes constantly scanning. They were good at what they did, professionals who'd earned their tridents through blood and determination. What they didn't know was that for the past 2 days, Stella had been shadowing their patrol from distances ranging from 300 to 800 meters. She'd watched them camp, observed their security procedures, noted their patrol patterns, not because she was the enemy, but because that was her mission. The SEALs thought they were operating independently, running their own operation based on intelligence from their command structure. What they didn't realize was that their operation had been folded into something larger, something that required capabilities they didn't possess. Stella's radio crackled softly in her ear, the transmission coming through encrypted channels. Overwatch, this is Guardian Actual. SEAL element approaching waypoint Charlie. Confirm your position. She keyed her throat mic with the gentlest pressure, her voice barely above a whisper. Guardian Actual, Overwatch. I have visual on SEAL element, distance 200 meters. I'm holding position in the tall grass at grid November Delta 7432. All clear in my sector. Copy, Overwatch. Maintain surveillance. Intel suggests enemy presence in the valley, but we don't have specific numbers or positions. Keep those SEALs alive. Understood. Overwatch out. Stella returned to her observation, her scope tracking the SEAL team as they moved through the creek bed. She'd been doing this kind of work for 8 years, operating in the shadows while other units got the glory. Some people called her Specialty Guardian Angel operations, the sniper who watched over assault elements without them knowing she was there, eliminating threats before they could develop, providing overwatch from distances that seemed impossible. She'd done it in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and now Myanmar. 143 confirmed kills, each one a threat that never got close enough to harm the teams she was protecting. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the valley into a blast furnace despite the lush vegetation. Stella barely noticed. She'd trained her body to handle discomfort that would break most people. Dehydration, heat, cold, the psychological weight of complete isolation, these were just part of the job. What mattered was staying focused, maintaining that perfect stillness that made the difference between invisible and dead. She'd been selected for this program 8 years ago after instructors at the Army Sniper School noticed something unusual about her performance. While other students struggled with shots beyond 800 meters, Stella was consistently hitting targets at 1,200. When they tested her at 1,500 meters with wind and elevation challenges, she adapted faster than anyone they'd ever seen. Her ability to read terrain, calculate ballistics, and maintain absolute focus under pressure marked her as exceptional even among the already elite sniper community. But it wasn't just the shooting that made her perfect for Guardian operations. It was her psychological profile. Most people couldn't handle the isolation, the days or weeks of operating completely alone in hostile territory with zero support. The knowledge that if something went wrong, no one was coming to save you. Stella thrived in that environment. She'd grown up in rural Montana, the daughter of a hunting guide who taught her to track elk through mountain terrain and make ethical kills at extreme distances. Solitude didn't frighten her. It centered her. The military had recognized they had someone unique and built an entire operational concept around her capabilities. They'd given her the best training available, access to cutting-edge equipment, and the freedom to operate with minimal oversight. In exchange, she'd spent 8 years protecting American warriors who never knew she existed. At 10:47 hours, the situation changed. Brennan's team had moved into a natural bottleneck where the creek bed narrowed between two rocky outcroppings covered in dense jungle vegetation. Good cover from direct fire, but limited visibility of the surrounding terrain. They were performing a security halt, checking their maps and preparing to move toward their objective, when Liu suddenly froze, his hand coming up in the universal signal for danger. Stella saw at the same moment Liu did. Movement on the ridgeline to the east, maybe 1,500 meters from the SEAL's position. She shifted her scope smoothly, the optic resolving into clarity at the distant position. What she saw made her blood run cold. Militant fighters, at least 20 of them, moving with tactical discipline that suggested training beyond what local insurgents usually possessed. They were setting up positions along the ridge with clear, overlapping fields of fire into the creek bed. Heavy machine guns, RPGs, and what looked like at least 2 designated marksmen with Dragunov sniper rifles. This wasn't a random patrol stumbling onto Americans. This was a prepared ambush, and the SEALs had walked directly into the kill zone. Brennan saw them a heartbeat later. His voice came across the radio, controlled but urgent. "All stations, this is SEAL 1. We have eyes on enemy force. Approximately 20 personnel at bearing 090, distance 1,500 meters. They're setting up an ambush. We need immediate fire support." The response came from their Tactical Operations Center. SEAL 1, Guardian Actual. Closest air support is 12 minutes out. Artillery is unavailable due to civilian population in the area. You need to disengage and move to alternate extraction point. Guardian, we're in a bottleneck with limited mobility. If we move, they'll see us and we'll be in the open. If we stay, they'll have us pinned with superior numbers and firepower. Brennan's tactical assessment was brutally accurate. We need options that don't involve getting shredded. Stella was already moving before the conversation finished. She'd been in this exact scenario before. Friendly forces trapped, enemy at distance, no immediate support available. This was precisely what she'd been trained for. Her fingers moved across the M110 with practiced efficiency, checking the chamber, verifying her dope card for 1,500-meter shots in current wind conditions, settling into a shooting position that would allow sustained fire. The M110 wasn't technically designed for 1,500-meter engagements. It was a semi-automatic platform, optimized for ranges out to 800 meters, maybe 1,000 in ideal conditions. 1,500 was extreme range for the weapon system at the absolute edge of its effective capability. But Stella had made shots at this distance before, understood the ballistics intimately, knew exactly how to compensate for wind, elevation, and the dozen other variables that could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. She keyed her radio. "Guardian Actual, this is Overwatch. I have clear line of sight to enemy position. Request permission to engage." There was a pause. Then a different voice came on. Colonel Rachel Foster, the overall mission commander. Overwatch, confirm your position and capability. We're talking about extreme range engagement against multiple targets. Ma'am, I'm at grid November Delta 7432, distance approximately 1,700 meters from enemy position. Wind is 3 knots from the west. Temperature is 94 degrees. I'm shooting slightly downhill. I can make these shots. Another pause. Foster knew exactly who Stella was, knew her record, but the request was still extraordinary. Overwatch, you're clear to engage. Priority targets are heavy weapons and leadership. Keep those SEALs alive. Understood. Overwatch engaging. Stella took 3 deep breaths, each one slowing her heart rate, bringing her body into the perfect calm state that precision shooting required. 1,500 meters. At that distance, her bullet would drop nearly 40 feet from the point of aim, would drift several feet with even slight wind changes, and would take nearly 3 seconds to reach the target. She'd have to lead moving targets, calculate for the Coriolis effect, account for temperature affecting her barrel. Most snipers would consider the shot nearly impossible with this weapon system, but Stella had spent 8 years making impossible shots. Her first target was the militant fighter setting up a PKM machine gun on the ridge. The heavy weapon was the biggest threat to the SEALs, sustained fire that could keep them pinned indefinitely and shred them if they tried to move. She acquired the target through her scope, watching him work the gun into position, calculating his pattern of movement. When he paused to adjust the tripod, she had her moment. The M110 cracked, the suppressor reducing, but not eliminating the distinctive sound of the shot. The round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, arcing across the valley in the beautiful parabolic curve that physics demanded. 3 seconds later, the militant fighter dropped like someone had cut his strings, killed instantly by a shot he never saw coming. The other fighters froze for just a moment, confused about where the shot had originated. 1,500 meters was beyond what they expected anyone to be shooting from, and the suppressor made directional sound location nearly impossible. That moment of confusion gave Stella time for her second shot. The RPG gunner was lifting his launcher, preparing to fire toward the creek bed where the SEALs were pinned. He never completed the motion. Stella's second shot caught him in the chest, and both he and his weapon tumbled backward into the rocks. Now the enemy fighters were scrambling, trying to find cover while simultaneously searching for whoever was killing them. Some started firing wildly in various directions, but none of them were shooting toward Stella's actual position. The distance and her perfect concealment kept her location completely unknown. SEAL 1, this is Overwatch. I've eliminated 2 threats including the machine gun and RPG. Working through remaining targets. Brennan's voice came back with barely controlled amazement. Overwatch, we don't even see where you're shooting from. What's your position? SEAL 1, that information is classified. Just trust that I have your back. Stay in cover and let me work. Stella was already acquiring her third target, one of the Dragunov-equipped marksmen who was scanning the valley with his scope, trying to locate the source of the incoming fire. He was good, methodical, potentially dangerous if he figured out where she was positioned. She didn't give him the chance. Her third shot sent him sprawling backward, his rifle clattering down the rocky slope. The militant force was breaking down now, their tactical discipline fracturing under the psychological pressure of an unseen sniper, killing them from impossible distance. Several fighters started moving back from their positions, seeking cover deeper in the rocks and jungle vegetation. Others tried to set up hasty defensive positions, but they were defending against a threat they couldn't locate. Stella methodically worked through the remaining high-value targets. The second, Dragunov marksman, a fighter who appeared to be giving orders, probably a squad leader or cell commander. Another RPG gunner who was trying to get into position. Each shot was a separate calculation, a distinct problem in applied physics and human biology. Wind was shifting slightly, the morning heat creating thermals that affected bullet trajectory. She compensated for each variable, made each shot count. Her breathing remained perfectly controlled between shots. Inhale slowly, exhale gradually. Find that natural pause between breaths where her body was completely still. In that moment of absolute stillness, she'd squeezed the trigger with pressure so gradual the rifle's discharge was almost a surprise. Then she'd worked the follow-through, watching the bullets trace through her scope, confirming impact, already calculating the next shot before the current target had hit the ground. After 15 minutes of sustained engagement, the enemy force had collapsed. 8 fighters were down, confirmed dead or seriously wounded. The remainder had withdrawn into the rocks and dense jungle, effectively neutralized as a threat. The ambush that should have destroyed the SEAL team had been systematically dismantled by a single shooter operating at extreme range. SEAL 1, this is Overwatch. Enemy force has withdrawn. You're clear to move to your alternate extraction point. I'll maintain Overwatch during your movement. Brennan's response came after a long pause. Overwatch, I've been doing this job for 12 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Who the hell are you? Stella allowed herself the smallest smile. Someone who's very good at their job, SEAL 1. Now move your team before they regroup. The SEALs displaced from the creek bed with textbook efficiency, moving in bounds while maintaining security. Stella tracked them through her scope, watching the surrounding terrain for any sign of renewed enemy activity. She'd stay in position for another hour minimum, making sure they reached safe extraction before she moved. But the militants weren't finished. At 11:34 hours, Stella spotted movement to the south, a separate enemy element, at least a dozen fighters, moving to cut off the SEALs' withdrawal route. They were using terrain effectively, staying in dead ground where the SEALs couldn't see them. But from Stella's elevated position 1,700 meters away, they were completely exposed. SEAL 1, Overwatch, you have another enemy element moving to cut you off from the south. I count 12 personnel moving through the wadi at grid November Delta 7648. They're trying to get ahead of you. Grant's voice came across this time. Overwatch, we don't have a good angle on that position. Can you engage? Stella was already shifting her aim. Engaging now. The range was even more extreme, nearly 1,800 meters with an unfavorable wind angle. She was pushing the M110 far beyond its design capability. But the alternative was letting the SEALs walk into another ambush, and that wasn't an option she was willing to accept. Her first shot at the new target was slightly off, striking rock near a fighter's position rather than the fighter himself. She'd overcorrected for wind. She adjusted mentally, recalculating the wind value based on the observed impact. The correction was subtle, maybe half a minute of angle, but at this distance, half a minute translated to several inches of difference at the target. She adjusted and fired again. This time, the round found its mark, dropping the lead fighter in the enemy column. The rest of the enemy elements scattered, seeking cover. But they were in open terrain with limited options, and Stella had a clear field of fire. She worked through them with mechanical precision, acquire, calculate, breathe, squeeze. Each shot was a problem solved, a threat eliminated. The semi-automatic capability of the M110 allowed her to maintain steady pressure, firing approximately every 12 seconds as she reacquired targets and adjusted for changing conditions. By the time she'd expended 20 rounds, the southern enemy element had been effectively destroyed. The survivors were fleeing back toward their original positions, abandoning any attempt to engage the Americans. SEAL 1, Southern threat neutralized. You're clear to continue movement. This time, it was Brennan who responded, and his voice carried something beyond professional appreciation. Overwatch, when we get back to base, I'm buying you whatever the hell you want to drink. That was the finest shooting I've ever witnessed. Appreciate that, SEAL 1, but I don't exist on your after-action reports. This conversation never happened, and I was never here. Understood. But whoever you are, you saved 4 lives today. Stella remained in position for another 90 minutes, tracking the SEALs until they reached their extraction point and helicopters lifted them out of the valley. Only after she confirmed they were safely airborne did she begin her own exfiltration, moving through the tall grass like a ghost, leaving no trace that anyone had ever been there. The debriefing happened 30 hours later in a secure facility that didn't officially exist on any map. Stella sat across a conference table from Colonel Foster and a man in civilian clothes who introduced himself as Thomas Hayes from the Defense Intelligence Agency, though everyone knew that was probably not his real name or his actual agency. Staff Sergeant Rivera, Foster began, I've reviewed the drone footage from the operation. 20 confirmed enemy killed at ranges between 1,400 and 1,800 meters with an M110 semi-automatic platform. That's shooting that shouldn't be possible with that weapon system. With respect, ma'am, shouldn't be possible just means most people can't do it. I can. Hayes leaned forward. You've been operating in this capacity for 8 years. 143 confirmed kills in Guardian operations, protecting special operations teams who never knew you were there. Your record is extraordinary. It's my job, sir. It's more than a job, Sergeant. What you did yesterday saved a SEAL team from certain death. Those men have families, futures, decades of service ahead of them. They're alive because you made shots that were at the extreme edge of physical possibility. Stella remained quiet. She'd never been comfortable with praise. The work was what mattered, not the recognition. Foster continued. The SEAL team commander filed an after-action report mentioning an unknown sniper who provided Overwatch. We classified it immediately and removed those sections, maintaining your operational security. But Lieutenant Commander Brennan is insistent about meeting whoever saved his team. That's not possible, ma'am. My effectiveness depends on anonymity. The moment people know I exist, they start looking for me. The moment they start looking, I become vulnerable. I agree, Hayes said, which is why we've already told Brennan that his Overwatch came from a classified drone system with advanced targeting capabilities. He doesn't need to know the truth. But we need to know what you need, Foster added. You've been doing this work for 8 years with minimal recognition and no real support structure. What would make you more effective? Stella considered the question carefully. Better rifle system. The M110 is good, but I'm consistently shooting beyond its designed range. Something in .338 Lapua Magnum would give me another 500 meters of effective range. Advanced weather monitoring equipment so I don't have to estimate wind conditions. And honestly, ma'am, I'd like to train other people to do this. I can't be everywhere, but if we had a team of Guardian snipers, we could cover more operations, save more lives. Foster and Hayes exchanged glances. We can authorize the equipment upgrades immediately, Foster said. The training program would require building an entirely new course and finding candidates with the necessary skill set. That's a larger undertaking. Start small, Stella suggested. Find 5 candidates who already have advanced sniper qualifications. I'll run them through 6 months of specialized training. If it works, we expand the program. If it doesn't, you've only invested in 5 people. I'll get you authorization to start recruiting, Hayes said. But understand, what you're proposing would formalize a capability that currently exists only because you exist. That creates expectations, requirements, bureaucracy. I understand, sir. But the alternative is continuing to rely on one person to cover operations across multiple theaters. That's not sustainable. And it means good people die when I can't be in 2 places at once. The meeting concluded with approvals for equipment upgrades and conditional authorization to develop a training program. Stella left the facility and returned to her quarters, already thinking about the next operation, the next team that would need protection they'd never know they had. 6 weeks later, Stella was in Syria, lying in rubble that had once been a building, watching a Delta Force team conduct a raid on an ISIS command facility. The new rifle system, a custom point .338 Lapua Magnum with advanced optics, performed beautifully at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. She eliminated 3 ISIS fighters who were moving to flank the Delta team, and the Americans completed their mission without ever knowing she was there. The point .338 Lapua had transformed her capabilities. Where the M110 had forced her to operate at the extreme edge of its performance envelope, the new rifle gave her comfortable accuracy out to 1,800 meters and usable precision beyond 2,000. The heavier bullet retained energy better at distance, bucked wind more effectively, and delivered devastating terminal performance. Combined with her enhanced weather monitoring equipment and upgraded optics, she was operating at a level that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. 4 months after that, she was training her first class of Guardian sniper candidates at a remote facility in Virginia. 5 carefully selected snipers who'd been identified as having the necessary combination of technical skill, psychological stability, and ability to operate in complete isolation. She taught them everything she'd learned through 8 years of trial and error: advanced ballistics, extreme-range shooting techniques, concealment methods, the mental discipline required to lie motionless for days while maintaining perfect alertness. The training was brutal. She pushed them through scenarios that simulated the psychological pressure of real operations, made them lie in uncomfortable positions for 12 hours while maintaining perfect vigilance, taught them to calculate complex ballistics problems in their heads while exhausted and stressed. Most importantly, she taught them that Guardian operations required a different mindset than conventional sniping. This wasn't about hunting targets. It was about protecting people, which meant sometimes the hardest decision was not taking a shot, because the risk to friendly forces was too high. 3 of the 5 made it through the program. They deployed to separate theaters, each one providing the same invisible protection that Stella had pioneered. The capability expanded slowly, carefully, always maintaining the secrecy that made it effective. 2 years later, Lieutenant Commander Brennan, now promoted to commander, was leading a SEAL platoon through hostile territory in Yemen when his element came under fire from an enemy force that should have destroyed them. His radio crackled with a now familiar transmission. "SEAL Actual, this is Overwatch. I have your position. Taking fire from bearing 045, distance 1,600 meters, engaging threats." Brennan never saw the sniper, never learned it was one of Stella's trained Guardians. But he knew that somewhere in the distance, someone was watching over his team with capabilities that seemed almost supernatural. After the operation concluded successfully with no American casualties, he filed the standard after-action report mentioning the classified Overwatch system that had provided support. And somewhere in the distance, a Guardian sniper was already packing up their equipment, preparing to move to the next position where another American team would need protection they'd never know they had. Stella Rivera continued operating for another 6 years before transitioning to full-time training and program management. By the time she retired, the Guardian Sniper program had expanded to 15 operators, providing Overwatch for special operations across 6 combat zones. Her personal record stood at 143 confirmed kills, each one a threat eliminated before it could harm American forces. She never met most of the people she'd saved. They never knew her name, never saw her face, never realized that their successful operations had depended on someone lying motionless in grass or rubble, making impossible shots at extreme distances while they did their jobs. But sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, Stella would think about that day in the Myanmar River Valley. The SEAL team that should have been destroyed, the shots she'd made at the edge of physical possibility, the 4 men who went home to their families because she'd done her job perfectly. She'd remember Brennan's voice on the radio, the mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She'd remember the feeling of the M110 recoiling against her shoulder with each shot, the 3-second delay before impact, the satisfaction of watching threats disappear before they could harm the people she was protecting. She'd remember the heat of the tropical sun, the smell of the grass, the absolute focus required to make those shots. And she'd remember why she'd spent 8 years lying in tall grass, making shots nobody thought were possible, protecting people who'd never know she existed. Because in the end, the work was what mattered. Not the recognition, not the glory. Just the knowledge that somewhere, American warriors were coming home alive because she'd been there, unseen but always watching, ready to rise from the grass when they needed her most. Years later, when Stella was asked to speak at a closed-door session for senior military leadership about the Guardian Sniper program, she kept her remarks brief. "The operators we protect are the tip of the spear," she said quietly. "They get the dangerous missions, the impossible objectives, the operations that make headlines in classified briefings. But every spear needs a shaft. Every sword needs a hand to wield it. We're not the warriors people celebrate. We're the shadows that keep those warriors alive long enough to become heroes." One general asked her what sustained her through those long hours of isolation, the days spent lying motionless in hostile territory with zero support. Stella's answer was simple. "Every time I look through that scope and see Americans doing their jobs downrange, I remember they're somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's parent. They have people waiting for them to come home. My job is making sure that happens. That's all the motivation I've ever needed." The Guardian Sniper program continued expanding long after Stella's retirement, but every operator who went through the training learned her fundamental philosophy. The best shot is the one the enemy never sees coming, and the best operation is the one where the people you're protecting never know you were there. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep. It just does what wolves do when sheep need protecting. And sometimes, the most important victories are the ones that nobody ever knows happened. Thanks for watching. Every woman has a story worth telling. Join us to hear them all.